Here I have this very quick video to share some practical tips for working with jersey fabrics. If you're ready, I'm ready. Let's go. Hello, my name is Juliet Uzor of SoSoNatural.com, and if you are into creating your own clothes, owning your style, and shamelessly and fearlessly showcasing them for everyone to see, then this is the right channel for you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't, and hit the bell notification right next to it so YouTube would notify you when next I upload a video. Hands up if you lean towards woven fabrics when you walk into a fabric shop. I do. Jersey, knit, stretch fabrics, whatever you like to call them, they are constructed and they're made in a completely different way to the way woven fabrics are made. Some of them stretch in all directions and some stretch in one direction. There is a lot to find out and learn about stretch fabrics. Well, we're not going to go into the whole terminology and the technology of it. We're just going to focus on practical tips for a person who likes to create clothes for themselves at home. The very first tip for you is stay away from straight stitches when you're working with stretch fabrics as much as you can, unless you are working on those sections of a garment that probably won't do a lot of stretching. For example, the side seams of looser garment designs. I'm not talking about those garments that are fitted like bodycon dresses. No, I mean fabrics that are much looser but made using jersey fabrics. Please stay away from straight stitches. Your best bet is to always use a zigzag or a lightning stitch. Lightning stitches are also called stretch stitches, and those stitches are like lightnings. Their zigzag isn't perfect like a actual zigzag. So those are your best bets for when you work with stretch fabrics. Or you could just use an overlocker if you already have one. Some sewing machines have triple stitches. Those ones are also, in my opinion, have worked nicely for hemming, and I've used those for creating hems because they allow for the fabric to stretch to some extent, and they do, so you won't get the seams ripping. So avoid straight stitches and stick to the much more suitable stitches like your stretch stitch, which is also called the lightning stitch, zigzag, or use your overlocker. So when you sew with stretch fabrics, you need to stay away from your regular universal needles. There are a few sewing needles that I have in my stash. I have a jersey needle, I've got jersey needles, I've got stretch needles, I've got ballpoint needles, and I've also got super stretch needles. I've used all of them, I've tried working with all of them, but my favorite to use of all time has got to be super stretch needles. These super stretch needles have been much better for me because they go through all types of, well, they've so far so good. All jersey fabrics that I've worked with, even lycra, they tackle all kinds of stretch fabrics, and I can't complain with these. And I've actually got just 2 left out of a pack of 7, so that tells you a lot. I also use my super stretch needles on my overlocker because it would tackle any type of fabric. So that's a practical tip that I thought I would share with you. Jersey fabrics tend to move a lot. They're not as stable as woven fabrics are, and when you cut out your garment pieces, I recommend switching to your rotary cutter rather than pair of scissors. Rotary cutters help to make sure that you are very accurate with your cutting out, and when I do that, I like to pair it with pattern weights. But sometimes I use a large ruler, so my pattern master, I put it over my sewing pattern, and it just stays in one place, and I cut around it using a rotary cutter. So switch your scissors, your pair of scissors, for rotary cutters if you have those, but if you don't, that's fine. Pair of scissors will do the job, but I think rotary cutters are much more accurate and they stop all of that movement that you get when you work with a pair of scissors. My next discovery has got to be something that goes with my sewing machine. It's called a walking foot. It's a very good tool to have. what it does is it stabilizes your fabrics and make sure that they do not stretch out whilst you're sewing them. So you know, you've got your two fabrics and you put them through the machine. Normally without this, you would have the feed dogs in the sewing machine just at the bottom, and they feed the fabric through, and during that movement you might have some kind of movement that you don't want to have whilst you're sewing. It has a mechanism at the top that acts like feed dogs as well, so you basically having feed dogs on top and below, and it helps your fabric go through seamlessly to make sure that your seams are perfect. Another thing that would help change your stretch fabric sewing game has got to be interfacing. Now when I mention interfacing, I mean using matching weight interfacing. So and you know, we have knit interfacing on the market these days, and those are perfect for strengthening your fabric when you want to sew buttonholes. All you need to do is iron them onto the wrong side of your fabric, then go ahead to sew on your buttonholes. Now what that does is it makes sure that your fabric doesn't pucker when you do go ahead to create a buttonhole. You don't want that puckering effect, you want it to be nice and flat. So use interfacing for strengthening your fabrics wherever you think you might have a bit of a pucker, for example, buttonholes. Imagine cutting out fabric pieces, pinning them together, putting them through your sewing machine, and finding out that something's happened to distort your fabric, or the setting doesn't work properly. In fact, type in the comment section "oops" to let me know that you've also had that kind of situation, because I have. So this would take me to the next tip. Remember to always test swatch your fabrics. So cut out a small test swatch, test out your setting on your sewing machine, test out the needles, test out the thread, everything. Just make sure everything works before you then go ahead to create your entire piece in using your project fabric. So do not make the mistake that I've made, and I hope this tip is as practical as possible for you. I've got a whole playlist on working with jersey fabrics, and in one of the videos I showed how to create a t-shirt dress using a very simple t-shirt sewing pattern, and when I did that, you would have noticed the way that I created the sleeves. If you haven't, go ahead and watch that video when you finish with this video and you'll see what I mean. Which brings me to my next tip. That tip is to sew on your sleeves on the flat. It's much easier with jersey fabrics. So what you do is, without sewing on your side seams, all you do is you pin on your sleeve onto the front and back, which have been sewed up together on the shoulder seams. So what that does is it eliminates the stress and the headache of, you know, fitting the sleeve onto the armhole. So sew it on the flat and then assemble the, you know, sew down from the hem of the sleeve down to the end of your side seams. That helps. That really does help when you're working with jersey fabrics. If I do not share this tip with you, then I will be doing you a disservice, and that tip is to focus on tricky sections in small segments. And this tip applies to a lot of aspects of sewing. So for example, if I have a V-neck band, and if you haven't watched that video is going to be linked here for you in the description box below. If you've got a V-neck band to tackle, and we all know how V-neck bands can be quite tricky to sew, do not go ahead to create the entire dress, jumpsuit, or whatever it is that's got a V-neck. Tackle the V-neck first. So you create your bodice and then insert the V-neck before you go ahead to assemble the entire garment. So please, whilst working with a fabric that most people find tricky, tackle those tricky aspects first in small segments before assembling the entire piece. And with that, I'm going to recommend clicking on these videos here on the screen that would show you more tips, tricks and hacks, and will give you more inspiration. And whilst you're watching that, I will see you in my next video. Enjoy the rest of your day and all the best.